Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Spirited Awards Roundtable discussion presented by Capoferri. My name is Jessica Sanders, and I am a bar owner and consultant in the United States Central region based in Austin, Texas. It has been my pleasure to serve for the first time on the Spirited Awards regional committees this year, and it is an honor to be moderating this panel today, which features colleagues from around the world and whose work I've greatly admired over the years. Over the past several months, members of the Spirited Awards Regional Committee have gathered to identify voices in each Spirited Awards region that have shaped the way this industry has adapted to COVID-19 and created emerging themes poised to push the spirits community forward. It has been so inspiring to hear from colleagues all over the world about how they've been able to bear witness to some really incredible work that has allowed our bars and our restaurants not only to survive, but also to thrive. The past 18 months have stretched our capacity in so many ways, our capacity for empathy, for resilience, for failure, and perhaps most importantly, for innovation. And that is what gathers us here today. There is an incredible amount of skill and resourcefulness that goes into creating innovation in a time of challenge. And we're lucky to be joined by a truly exceptional panel of speakers who are going to share their experiences and some of the lessons that they've learned along the way as they have navigated the pandemic. And what these establishments and organizations did really set the bar, not just for what it means to define our industry, but to redefine an industry in the last 18 months. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. And if you could please just give a wave when I say your name, and we'll go from there. So from my own region here in the central US, in Austin, Texas, Caer, Maiko, and Sharon Yeung, who run the Daijibu pop-up. From the US East region, coming from Miami, Florida, Jacqueline Pirolo from Machiolina. Moving over to Europe, Timo Janse, Flying Dutchman Cocktails in Amsterdam. Back across the ocean to Canada, Evelyn Chick from Canada, Salty Paloma and Evelyn Chick Projects. From the Asia Pacific region, Rincy Varghese from Mr. Jerry's Cocktails in Goa, India. Joining us from Latin America, Adrián Glickman, Floreria Atlántico in Buenos Aires. And finally, representing the US Central or US West Coast region, excuse me, from the West Coast, Mike Capoferri from Thunderbolt in Los Angeles, California. Welcome. Thank you all for contributing your time and your talent to today's discussion. I wanted to start with you, Michael, because your bar, Thunderbolt, was one of the very first in the United States to kind of immediately pivot to this ready to drink to go cocktail format. And from what I understand of Thunderbolt, the bar has like a decidedly Southern flair to it. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you sort of translate the culinary aesthetic or point of view in your bar into your to-go program? Did you sort of just take the menu that you had at the time and copy and paste it into a to-go format? Or did you find yourself sort of having to R&D a whole new menu on the fly?
Yeah, so I would say it's a little bit of a combination of both of those things. We were super early to adapt. We were, if you can say, in a fortunate place. If we can consider anything fortunate during the pandemic for bars and restaurants, we were in a pretty unique place where we sort of had a heads up because New York got legalized for to-go cocktails first. So we sort of saw it coming and we started planning for that immediately. Our cocktail menu serendipitously is comprised of a lot of cocktails that are sort of stable already or sort of can fit in packaging in a way that gives you a very similar, if not equal, experience to drinking that cocktail at the bar. So we were able to use a lot of our same cocktails with it, as well as menu items on the food menu. But I think where the interesting like creativity and pivots had to happen was that people, although they were very happy with our existing menu, which we planned on keeping the same for at least a year, they grew bored of them as to-go offerings. So we did have to develop a ton of new cocktails because we had to keep the programming new. We had to continue to give ourselves something to talk about. The only way we could market is by coming up with new stuff to sell. We found that sort of demand dried up for the initial 10 cocktail menu, and we sort of had to keep building within our style and have new offerings all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of bars had a very similar experience. One thing about Thunderbolt that I was curious about is prior to the pandemic, your bar was already known for using technology in some really innovative ways. And I wanted to ask how you applied some of that expertise in technology to your to-go cocktail programs at the Jump.
Sure. So we have a lot of things like centrifuges and like carbonation equipment, and we were already shopping for a can seamer because we were going to be serving canned cocktails in the place anyway. We have custom refrigeration to where we can serve cocktails at an appropriate cocktail temperature, so 20-degree-ish Fahrenheit. So we were sort of ready unknowingly to do to-go cocktails. We work with pasteurization a lot. We talk about shelf life on our things because we want service to be really fast at the bar. And all of those things sort of translate well into to-go packaging. So we use a combination of our can seamer. We did a lot of anything carbonated we were serving in a can to go. We were using heat sealer on our vacuum sealer to create like custom pouches with custom labels for anything that was like a stirred cocktail or a built cocktail. We worked with sort of like acid adjuncts instead of using fresh citrus. We worked with, lime oil solubilized into pure alcohol instead of using lime. There was sort of a lot of things, a lot of techniques we were working on already that translated naturally into to go more shelf stable, safe to take home cocktails.
Amazing. And as your program sort of evolved, how did you measure the success of it as you kind of went? You mentioned that sort of the demand for the initial batch really dried up, and then you had to come up with new menus along the way. What were your metrics of success? Was it just revenue coming through the door, or a buzz that you heard about people talking about the drinks? How did you define what was successful and not successful along the way?
It was really like the first time revenue is one thing, but like we sort of wrote off the opportunity for profit during this period. Let's just survive. Let's just like pare down. Let's just see, what's the minimum we need to do. And it sort of scaled from there. We do care about what people are saying now more than ever. Like we never cared about getting press write-ups before, and now we care because it directly translates to business now. So we did sort of everything during that. Success was like, we did 18 pop-ups with different chefs who were out of work during the pandemic. We worked with different brands to feed 2,000 meals to out-of-work hospitality workers. We would work with a frozen meal company to make frozen versions of our meals and sell them so people could cook them at home. It was every week there was a different metric for success. We had to find a way to keep it interesting, to keep people coming in, to keep people talking about us. And so it really, the couple of staff members I had left, the running joke was like, okay, what's our brilliant idea this week? We have to have a brilliant idea every week in order to keep this going. So success has been a moving target. Let's call it that.
Well, I'm glad you're still standing. Adrián, your cocktail program also involved some canning technology. And in fact, from what I understand, it really is centered on a canned cocktail line of to-go drinks. I wanted to ask you, from the creative perspective, the process for creating drinks for a canned format, how is that different than the creative process that you and your team undertake when you're designing a traditional menu?
Yes, actually, for us, it was just trying to, same as with Maiko's, we adapted our current cocktail program to the canning system. We already had that in mind. We started, Floridia has 2 levels, a street level that's a smaller venue where we would have, I would say since, at least 4 years ago, pre-bottled cocktails, Negronis, spritz, simple stuff just to get people waiting to go to the downstairs to our basement bar. That's the main bar with the larger menu. So we were already moving in that direction. We bought a year before the pandemic the can seamer that was actually in Argentina is not as easy to come by. So it was a strike of luck in that matter. And as soon as it started, we had 52 families, depending on how the business was going to survive and how could we, reimagine the business. So it started out of pure desperation and then just trying to adopt cocktails. We work with a very complex pre-production. We work with a lot of small producers that don't use any type of conservatives in their juices, even with small producers, with small batch producers that use fresh fruit. So it was a bit of a challenge. And we had a few initial runs that we kept around the neighborhood only just to see how that would evolve, how that would work. And luckily from there, well, we started shipping all around Argentina, and it turned itself into a new line of business for Florida, much bigger potentially than the seating of a bar that you can get. So it's exciting.
That's amazing. Actually, that kind of takes me to a different direction, which is talking about once you have reopened for some level of in-person experience, balancing, that pivot back to dine-in service with all of these new projects and new revenue streams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's for once, in Latin America, I'm sure people from Latin America can relate to that. Argentina is no different in that sense. We're very used to having to be as dynamic as we can. It's a very dynamic market. So we're usually coming up with different opportunities, different lines of business. And we actually tackled this one as, a new challenge that the market was throwing at us. There's still, in Argentina, we are still in not some sort, a limited occupancy levels. We are right now at 50% with reduced hours. So we're still working with the people that was part of the team initially. We got to keep most of the workers. So that for us was the biggest success. And now we are just dividing teams. Teams that are in charge of the production side, people that were initially more used to the pre-batching. We are not at the levels. We cannot have people standing, for instance, is only seated. So the volume of the actual bar is still allowing us to work with the same crew that we had now divided by the people that's working on the canning line and the people that's working on the actual bar.
Wow. Your bar is number 7 on the world's 50 best bars list. Congratulations. One of the things that I was interested to ask you about was there's a special kind of discipline to paring a program down or simplifying it. And I wanted to ask you for your perspective on, doing this new to-go canned cocktail format, what the experience has been like. Do you feel like you've had to sacrifice some of the complexity or the elegance that your guests were used to? And how have you guided your team towards that path of really stripping things down and simplifying them as you move to this new model?
Florida was always about the stories behind every cocktail. We are an immigrant bar. It speaks a lot about Argentina migration. This last cocktail program actually was deferring to the smaller migrations that we had. Argentina is mainly Italian and Spanish in terms of migration, but when you go a bit further within Latin America, you get even in Argentina, the Irish, the Jewish, and that brings a lot of color into what you can tell about those stories. You can tell. So it was every cocktail always starts with a bit of a story. In this case, little towns that have in Misiones, in the northwest part of Argentina, where you have in the borders closer to Brazil, where you have one Apóstoles, one town that's almost, I would say, 100% Dutch, and that's very interesting. And how that, for us, how do we get to translate that into a cocktail was a bigger challenge. And from there, we always had very complex pre-production and batching systems. So the big challenge, and I think all of us can relate here, was to adapt that to a shelf life type of thing. And that was challenging. It still is. It didn't limit the cocktails that we chose for the canned line, it limited the amount of cocktails that we could pick. We ended up with an initial line of 6, and then we worked with limited editions that have a shorter shelf life, and we're very insisting on that. And I think for us, the big challenge was education of the consumer, for them to understand Argentina didn't have a very well-developed RTD market. So you would have RTDs, but on the price here, on the low price side, nothing too fancy, and people wouldn't drink pre-batch cocktails. Actually, in Argentina, it's not that common now to have cocktails. Well, pre-pandemic, it wasn't as common to have cocktails at home. You know, a cocktail was a bit of an experience in Argentina. They had to go to the bar. So I think this pivoted a bit the customs and how people are relating to themselves to our industry. So the big challenge for us was not as much as getting the cocktail to them. We tried to educate them about shelf life. That was first. And then how to turn that can into a bit of an experience, just a bit of a bar that you've heard of. And Argentina is a very large country. So for us, we always try to showcase what we do nationally. So for us, it was a great challenge, but also, you know, an amazing moment to hear people that would never have been able to come to Florida to actually taste the same cocktails that we would present in the bar.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Talking about, you know, getting your drinks into the hands of folks that maybe otherwise wouldn't have had the access to it. I wanted to talk to Oron because your bar, Imperial Craft Cocktail Bar, really leaned into a door-to-door delivery service at the beginning of the pandemic. And I wanted to talk about the logistics of doing that in Tel Aviv. And did you know that that was going to be sort of a necessity right away, or was that a need that evolved over time?
That was an absolute evolving, reacting to the situation. That I remember the first quarantine in Israel happened mid-March, and nobody believed it'll happen at that time. And it all came surprising to everyone. And we ended up with a lot of stock, and a lot of staff were not sure what they're going to do, and a lot of questions in the air in terms of the business. So what can we do with it? Can we, nobody knows how long we're going to be closed, or for how long we're going to have to wait until work can come back. And so we tried working with bottled cocktails before, RTDs, cans. The local crowd didn't really react to it. The drinking culture, the local drinking culture, was more about making it fresh right in front of the guest, and a lot of our customers didn't get that. Like it didn't catch on. But then quarantine happens, and people are stuck at home for the next 2.5 months. That was the first time, and our initial thoughts were, we have to get these things going. So we just took a couple of cocktails that would work well in bottles and just served the immediate ones, and contacted some of our regulars and put up social media posts about it. And then we had a lot of staff that were looking for something to do. You're allowed to leave the house if it's for work here in Israel. So it really worked well when we could combine and connect between employees who are sitting at home, and obviously sitting at home for 2.5 months can be very depressing, and we can give them the official permit to leave the house and come to the bar, grab a box full of drinks, and drive around the city in their bikes, and just deliver them to regulars who they haven't met in a long time, they haven't had a chance to talk to in a long time. So it was a wonderful way to connect and combine and keep our staff busy during this time, give them something to focus on, keep our guests getting what little bit of escapism the bars would provide them, and they couldn't get that anymore. And it just grew from that. And about 2 or 3 weeks into starting the bottled cocktail program, we were swamped. Like, we had to come up with new menus and new ideas. I would regularly come in to make special requests by regulars saying, that's nice, but we want to have something from your other menus, or we want to have something from the past, or can you make me a special drink that just for me? And that personal touch was everything that we needed to sort of keep in touch with our guests and keep the bar alive during quarantine. So it really worked wonders. if before the first quarantine there were no bottled cocktail program, very little deliveries, if any, it's booming right now. Like you'd see bottled cocktails all across Israel. Every office would have them. Every company would give them as gifts to their employees. It's incredible how much that blossomed, and it's all the result of the last year and a half.
Wow. Thank you for touching on regulars, because your bar is in a hotel, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that and catering to a hotel clientele during a pandemic when travel is really discouraged. And are you finding that the regulars, that when you speak of regulars, are you speaking of people that are frequent travelers to the area, or are these people that live directly in the community of the hotel that come to your bar frequently?
So in normal times, the hotel and the bar cater to very different clientele in that sense. Like the occasional guest would take a room in this hotel, but the stark difference between the Imperial Hotel and the Imperial Bar actually serves our brand very well in that sense. It's an experience of expectations, disappointment, and refinding yourself in an amazing bar that we love. It's a great part of what the Imperial is. But on normal days, it wasn't much to do. Like they didn't relate to each other. During the pandemic, being a hotel bar gave us a lot of bonuses or a lot of opportunities that we can use. It allowed us to operate the bar long before other bars were open, long before other restaurants were open, and so to sort of reliven the experience through the connection with the hotel. People would come in, they take a room in the hotel. There were no tourists for the last almost year and a half. There were no tourists in Israel whatsoever. The airport was basically closed most of the time, but we could get locals from the city or from other cities in the country who haven't had their yearly vacation or any number of vacations that they usually do, come into the hotel, take a room at the hotel, and then use the bar or experience the bar and have fun that we could operate in that. That was an excellent connection to it. But being able to open the bar early, being able to operate the bar as a hotel bar gave us great opportunities to reconnect with our local regulars, to bring back up and keep in touch with the community that we're working with. We've realized how much influence the bar has in the sense of the experience of people walking into the bar for the first time. I'm sure everybody in the panel have seen that, is very emotional. People who haven't been to a bar in several months or even a year, and they walk in for the first time and they have somebody serving them. They were amazed at being served a menu and being able to choose from a menu and then being served the check. And people have absolutely forgotten what that means. And it was an amazing experience to be able to bring them back into the fold, sort of give them that opportunity again.
Yeah, you mentioned that the to-go cocktails prior to the pandemic were just not very commonplace in Tel Aviv, and now you see them everywhere, right? What do you think Imperial is doing better than anybody else right now that has the potential to really help our industry as a whole evolve?
It's a tough one. I think everybody's trying very hard, and everybody's like the initial bottled cocktail program for everybody in Israel was a reaction to reality. And that's an excellent way to cope with the crisis when it happens, but the crisis moves on and just leaves a lot of opportunity. And so the question now is, what do you do with it further? Like, do you continue to do bottled cocktails? Does it come at the expense of your bars? Like, are you losing work because your regulars or your clientele prefers to drink those cocktails at home? Or how do you differentiate the product that you serve in the bar and the product that you serve in a bottle? And we all just keep trying very hard. I think there's a lot of very talented people in there. For us, it was just an opportunity to reevaluate our priorities, to realize that we need to put our staff higher in the priorities. We need to find ways to keep them busy and keep them healthy during the crisis. And those opportunities, those priorities stayed with us long after the bars reopened. So we're happy to have that now, where we're rethinking a lot of items in our system, a lot of conditions of employment, and a lot of the staff training, for example, in order to bring it up and move forward from that. Like not get stuck at the same point of reacting and selling bottles as a sort of patch solution to the reality, but to turn it into something more than that. Everybody's doing bottled cocktails right now in Israel, and I think many of these bars are doing amazing work. I'd like to think that we've taken that further a little bit in the sense of like thinking about our priorities, where we want to put our staff, where we want to put our regulars, how do we stay in touch with the people during the crisis. That was a great thing that we took from that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Moving over to India, I wanted to talk to Rincy. First of all, as someone who's not very familiar with the drinks culture there, would you talk a little bit about the cocktail culture and the cocktail community in India? What was it like before the pandemic, and what is it like now?
To be honest, India was never a cocktail-driven market. It was basically just straight up drinks. But we have a lot of bartenders or Indian bartenders who've gone abroad and come up with these abundant experiences and come and either open up a bar or joined a new bar and created an awareness about cocktail, created a niche with the market. And also rather women in India rather have a cocktail rather than have like a straight up drink, because that's what they enjoy. And the cocktail scene was picking up before the entire COVID scene happened. Slowly with the metro cities, and then moving into places like Goa, where you have maximum number of tourists coming in from across the world and who expects to have a different experiences. So off late, I would say the cocktail scene has improved from what it used to be a couple of years ago to what it is now. And that's the reason why the entire idea of Mr. Jerry's cocktail didn't even come up, because we couldn't go out during the pandemic, and go to the kind of a place where everybody tends to go out and would love to have a drink with your friends. So to have a cocktail at home for anybody to make without having a bartender, that's the whole process. And because of how the cocktail scene has picked up, that kind of helped us develop the cocktail community slowly in India right now. Yeah,
amazing. I understand that you've had some particular challenges in India around supply chain and also navigating some really complicated liquor laws there. Would you talk a little bit about that and how you navigated that?
Yes, India, when it comes to liquor, they are, I would say, in all honesty, they're not as supportive as they should be. But we have our own factory, just the Blue Ocean Beverages, which has been running for the past 10-15 years, and we work with the government on a very close relationship. First of all, the biggest hurdle was to educate them what is a cocktail, what is Mr. Jerry's cocktail, because they were used to just having, okay, this is a whiskey, this is a tequila, or this is gin, and this is rum. That's all that there was there in the category. There was nothing called as ready to drink or curated or crafted cocktails. So our first step was to educating them, telling them what it is and how it is made and how it is going to help people. So that was the biggest hurdle that we are still facing in certain cities. Some of them were very open, like in Bombay, we found it very quickly to launch it. But in Goa, it did take us about, I would say, approximately at least 3 to 4 months of sitting with them and explaining them what it is. And that is just one part of it. Then there are a lot of other things where, okay, how are you going to pay the duty for it? How is it going to be done? So yeah, it is hard, but luckily I feel that Mr. Jerry's cocktail coming into India has paved an easier easier path for anybody else who wants to come into the same scenario. And also one of the biggest challenges, because it was first ever for India to have a cocktails in a bottle. We've had cocktails basically just a premix where you go by and you have your alcohol and you use the premix. This is the first time where you just literally have a cocktail in a bottle, and so explain to people that all you need to do is open, just put some ice into a glass and just pour over. that was a huge thing to educate people, and especially the government people. Oh God, it was a huge, massive challenge. But touch wood, we've managed. Hoping it continues the same way. But yeah, the educating bit is still always going to be there in India. It's going to take a while for sure.
Yeah. Now that that path has sort of been cleared for you and for others, what are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?
What we're looking is definitely trying to expand into more states, and also, if everything goes well, also probably enter globally. That is the plan that we have. This year, we're mainly focusing on entering into more states in India, because every state have different law when it comes to their alcohol. So we have to alter ourselves or change ourselves according to their rules, and also consider how to go ahead, because we're still struggling with certain states for the past, since the time of launch. So hopefully another 4 more states or 4 more cities in India, and maybe by next year, probably global is what the plan, and also to launch more variants. So this is the plan that we have for now.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Speaking of challenges, Evelyn, I'm really excited to talk to you. I've been a big fan of a lot of your work for many years. And you've kind of done it all during the pandemic. You've done cocktail kits, you've done subscription service, virtual classes, reformatting pop-up events. But most recently, you've had to navigate what I would consider to be a crisis within a crisis, right? We're all tackling this horrible pandemic. But very recently, your business's Instagram account was hacked. It was held for ransom and then ultimately permanently deleted, with all of your followers going with it, right? Which is awful. So I hope it's not too soon to talk about it, but I was hoping that you could share a little bit about what that experience is like, and then sort of how you're dealing with it now as this crisis sort of unfolds in real time.
Yeah, and Jessica, honestly, like it's just been the craziest year, I'm sure, for everybody, but especially in Canada. And I was trying to explain to Alex, the situation that we've been in, but in Ontario, especially, indoor dining has been shut down for 366 days in total.
Wow.
And no one was kind of given information as to when things could open. So it was a very similar feeling when the first bar opened in the summer, and I felt like the city was just wild. Everyone went insane, and the energy was amazing. And I just felt like every time you kind of get ahead, there's just another roadblock, but it kind of makes you stronger as a person. But yes, recently my business account, Salty Paloma, which houses the artisanal cocktail rimmers, cocktail kits, and virtual experiences that myself and my business partner, Amanda, has created. All of the 12,000 followers that we have, everything got direct messages of an account that faked to be an Instagram help support line. And poof, it was gone. But again, that's just another set of challenges that you have to go through. But that really kind of showed myself and Amanda how great of an online community we've created through these virtual cocktail classes and the subscription, because so many people kind of banded together to report the hacker account. And we actually today got our original account back. I just got the email about half an hour ago. So she's in tears. She's called me a few times since we started the seminar. But and honestly, like it's just about again, resiliency and positivity. And that's what we strive to do throughout the last year. And with Salty Paloma, which actually started as an artisanal saw company, we decided that we wanted to bring world-class drink experiences to everyone's homes. And I think I'm a little bit different in a sense where I don't have a physical bar, but I'm actually sitting in my new venue space right now that is slotted to open fall this year. But our focus was really to kind of preserve the dignity of cocktails and preserve the interest in cocktails in the community, because without having a single bar being open for 366 days, without having the physical interaction with a bartender and not having that experience being provided to the consumer base, we don't want them to lose interest in cocktails. And that was my biggest focus during the pandemic, is to continuously kind of push the envelope on drink serves and how to create those experiences with guests while they're trapped at home.
Incredible. Your pivot was unique, I think, in two ways. One was that it really leaned on a subscription-based service, and the other that it was really rooted or anchored by non-alcoholic offerings that the guest could choose to enjoy either with or without booze at home. Could you talk a little bit about that? How intentional were those two decisions when you set out, and what has been the pro and con in those two areas?
So initially we sold our kind of first cocktail kit around November 13th of 2020. And it was all kind of put together classic cocktail kits with some kind of different spins. And my whole ideology about like drink making is curating inclusive serves, and I feel like drinks inclusivity is such a big part of my personal drinks career. So in January, I decided to launch Stay at Home Cocktail Club, which is a non-alcoholic subscription service, and I feel like that really kind of opened up to a lot of different markets, because a lot of the trends that's sticking around, it's not a trend, it's sticking around, low ABV serves, zero proof serves, is a very conscious way of a lot of people who might not want to imbibe for whatever reason it is, to be able to enjoy that experience. And with the lockdown, everyone who aren't necessarily imbibing at home is probably just used to having some sodas or some like cool new like kombuchas or RTDs. So this subscription service essentially gives them something new and creative to look forward to monthly. And for those who want to imbibe, there's a kind of sub recipe card for recommendations for some cool spirits that they can put in to those particular cocktails to make them spirited. And I guess it's just the way that we structured our cocktail kits is a very simple kind of 1-2 step method to create world-class cocktails at home, but having everything, again, like the challenges of like stabilizing it, ensuring that it is travelable, ensuring that it is easy enough so someone who approaches the cocktail kit won't be nervous to make it. So I think that was kind of our focus for Stay at Home Cocktail Club, which is our subscription service, is to promote drinks inclusivity and allow for, again, that creativity and that interest in cocktail to continue throughout the pandemic.
Very cool. You have developed a very impressive client roster that includes some pretty large businesses like TikTok and Amazon. I was kind of curious how you cultivated relationships of that level over the last 18 months. And working through the pandemic, first of all, how did you attract their attention, and have you found those to be fruitful experiences or sort of wrought with some unanticipated challenges along the way?
I mean, challenges are always going to be a thing. Like when I did our first 320 person virtual event, I was like, wow, this is something I've never done before. So you kind of just learn as you go. But I think, again, it is just keeping the consistency and quality of your product. And that is so much there's so much to be said about being able to provide that service, even if you are doing it virtually, ensuring that your communication with the guests is exactly how they would if they were to step into an event space and do an event in person. So I think those particular connections kind of helped with our brand and how we structure those particular corporate events. And it just spread like wildfire, like word of mouth. And yeah, we actually curated all the cocktail kits for the Junos, which is like the Canadian, the Canadian version of the largest music award, and for their 50th anniversary. So somewhere out there, Justin Bieber has one of my cocktail kits, which I got excited about. But I think it's just really pretty much like keeping the consistency of your product and really putting faith in the product that you put out.
Something, because you've done so much and you've cast such a wide net in the types of endeavors that you have undertaken in the last year, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about maybe the things that haven't gone so well, or the things that just wore you out, right? And, with all of these different like pivots within pivots, can you point to something that you just sort of feel like, man, I am never doing that again? It was really cool. Oh. It was fun to work on. It was a really exciting endeavor, but the juice was not worth the squeeze.
I mean, I'm a huge pick your battles person, but I'm very fortunate that I don't think there's a single thing during and which I've like dabbled into that I wouldn't keep. And I'm very lucky that there are a lot of industry folks who's helped with this process. And it's just so much about like delegating what you can to the others. So I would say that I'm keeping everything, but I'm not sure about like, we've recently started doing in-person events again, and especially like translating the virtual to in-person is a very, very large hurdle that we have to go through, because our brand is so, strong in the virtual realm, and as well as the gift giving realm. And I think that's kind of what's a little bit different than what I'm doing versus like just the to-go cocktails, because they're gift sets. So we actually are listed on Indigo, which is like a massive kind of gift giving platform. And I think, translating it to an in-person experience, I probably it squeezed a lot of juice out of me, but I can only keep squeezing, because when life gives you lemons, you just
That's
make
right.
lemonade.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Turning the page over to Timo in Amsterdam. So at Flying Dutchman, one of your pivots was you launched a really exciting web shop. And what was impressive to me about this, that it wasn't just selling to-go cocktails, it also included things like merchandise and bar tools, candles, house-made candies, pickles. What sort of led you down that path to decide that that sort of bar ephemera would be really attractive to your clientele?
Well, first of all, I would just like to say that for Flying Dutchman Cocktails, community is central to everything that we do. So when you look at the name Flying Dutchman Cocktails, it's all about one sentence, is you must learn how to walk before you can run, before you can fly. So, the Netherlands, kind of like what I also heard from India, from our previous speakers, well, doesn't really have a cocktail culture that much. And also, meanwhile, you have bartenders that are kind of going, crazy with these molecular, out of the box kind of thinking, whereas the consumer doesn't really understand this. So what's really important to us is to educate the consumers, our own staff, and actually the whole community, and building up that community of cocktails in the country. So when we were hit with the pandemic and the first lockdown was happening, we knew that we had just opened a second bar. We were working on that, and we knew that we weren't going to get any support from the government on that. So we were really in the danger zone. So we knew it was kind of like a fight or die kind of situation. And what was central to us was to keep our staff in the best way possible. And one of the things that I was actually the most proud of, I'm going to show you actually. I'm not trying to take my clothes off. But this was something that was given by our staff. I don't know if you can see it. It just says "Best Boss," and that was really heartwarming to me, and really showed, what we were doing it for in the end. So when we started launching, we started with doing cocktails through delivery, but quickly we noticed that the reach wasn't big enough. Actually, we started doing delivery cocktails prior to the lockdown, or prior to Corona. So we moved to doing the cocktails, sending the cocktails. We did it, we're still doing it on a subscription basis, so every 2 weeks. But we kind of made a little roadmap for ourselves, and things that excited us, things that we wanted to do ourselves, and that we really had fun with. So my business partner, Tess, already had a cocktail tool line. I already made my own cocktail cherries. So we were like, oh, if we already have this web shop platform, why not continue on that road and make things that excites us, make things that I'd like to have, and kind of make this feeling of people at home enjoying our cocktails. So that brought us to, obviously, like, to things so from the tools, it went to the cherries that we have. Then we started doing the candles. We had like cocktail candies, and then we started like pickling our own kind of like fruits and vegetables, and selling those, and obviously continuing with cocktail workshops as well. So we really wanted to, we didn't say no to anything really. We would try anything, and actually learn a lot from it, and had a lot of fun. And in the end, what was really important, and I think Oron also talked about it as well, is for what was really great for us is to continue the conversation with our guests. So through our subscriptions, and our clientele, we were able to reach so much wider audience than the bar itself even could. Not just the regulars that we had, but create new regulars and excitement throughout the country and even throughout Europe because of it. So that was great experience.
Yeah, the cocktail inspired wax melts I find to be very fascinating. Could you talk a little bit about what those are for those that haven't seen it, and how that particular innovation came to pass?
Okay, so what we did is like I said, we kind of made a roadmap. So we kind of decided like, hey, so what is our fun things to do? And we started, I've got one here, and we started actually proposing the cocktail candies. And my business partner, Tess, she was like, oh no, I love this. I'm gonna get headfirst in this. So she just researched it, and we really went kind of like a little bit of a DIY hobbyist approach on it, so it's really a case of the cocktail candles where she just makes them at home, and as they are selling them, when we run out, we just send her a message just like, we need more candles, and then she just starts to make them, and they're all based around this the aromas of some of our best-selling cocktails that we've had in the past. So like I said, I think we just had a lot of fun creating it, and then in a later stage, I was reading up about these cocktail pickles, and I was like, oh, this stuff is this is amazing, and why isn't anybody doing this? And that really triggered me to start at home and pickling all of these things and working with all of these vinegars and creating these products, and then it's just great at the end of the road to see them in production and selling them. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, and your bar is now hosting guests in person again, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Similarly to what I asked earlier, what has that been like? Is it sort of like riding a bike where the guests come back in and you're just sort of ready to welcome them, or has it been what has it been like to kind of physically pivot back to hosting guests now while you're in the back making candles and candies and things?
Well, I think we were fortunate enough that when the reopening started happening, it coincided with the summer. So our web shop kind of organically goes down as any web shop in the summer, as people are on holiday, so it's harder to sell. So that was kind of like, as the bar went up, the sales of the web shop dipped a little bit, so we were able to restructure it and in fact move a lot of stuff to storage or to my house, or to reorganize how the web shop is done, whereas being able to have guests again became it's our core business, is what we love, but and it was just an amazing thrill. And last weekend I was working, and we actually, one of the guests that came in was a regular that had a subscription with us, and I'd never met this person in real life. I just had contact online, and it was really great to make drinks for this guy after over a year of him having subscribed, and making drinks for him, from a distance. So it's been really nice. I think in person is what you really want to do. But we are not stopping with anything. We're continuing our web shop. We're continuing our subscription service, because there's a lot of people that we are reaching right now. They're 4 hours drive away from our bar, so they're not there anytime soon. So we're not stopping with anything. It's just that it does feel very, very good to welcome guests back into bar.
Amazing. Well, speaking of welcoming guests back in the bar, I wanted to pivot to a restaurant in the United States, Jacqueline from Jacqueline in Miami. I think sometimes we lose the opportunity to talk about wine or beer, for that matter, when we're talking with, within the conversation of the cocktail community. But wine is such a huge part of Jacqueline's success. From what I understand, it's kind of a cornerstone of your professional background. And I wanted you to touch on, if you would, your wine subscription service at Jacqueline, and kind of the intersection of your wine program and your cocktail program. And have you gotten wine nerds to embrace the cocktail program at the restaurant over the last 18 months? And have you gotten cocktail people into wine that otherwise wouldn't be? Would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure thing. We for sure, even pre-pandemic, we're definitely known for our wine list. We started just as everybody else, selling everything to go once sort of our doors had to shutter, and we shifted to go dining only. So not only were we selling to go cocktails, we were selling even more wine. We started doing wine kits, wine boxes. We started doing delivery of wine to people's homes, and found that to be really successful for us. We started doing 3-bottle mystery packs, so you could just order that online, and we would sort of you could specify, I want 2 red, 1 white or whatnot, and we'd include some information in there on what you were getting. That took off so well that we then transitioned into a proper wine club, which now has about 85 members a month. It's a monthly wine subscription. And that theme now, you either have a 2, 4, or 6 bottle option. And the theme varies every single month, whether it be, March was women winemakers, May was island wines. Last month we did a feature on wines from Chile. So it can be regional, or the theme is kind of open. I think as far as your question with sort of intersection and getting people on board with it, I think it really comes from our staff. I really have to attribute them to it. From when we unfortunately had to let some of them go, we always were able to maintain a core group. And I think just them really getting behind what we were doing and their excitement, we for sure were able to sort of get the cocktail nerds, quote unquote, on board with wine. I think, as you mentioned, that there sort of is a lack of wine and beer, as you mentioned, being included within the cocktail world. And I think that there's a really a wonderful interest with it. So I think for sure all of within the bar industry hopped on right away. And I think that that's what made us realize we can do this. We can try and have a go at this, for good, and keep this thing going. And it's not just a quick fix to try and figure something out, as maybe some of the other programs were. This one sort of lasted. It was a little bit more difficult, I think, to get some of our wine people on board with the cocktail realm. That proved to be a little bit more challenging, but actually what we found more success in with them was our Amaro program, and being able to sell a lot of our Amaros that you maybe can't get at your local liquor stores here in Miami anyway. So they were really excited to get on board with that. And when they would come to pick up their food, we had our bottles open still, so we could pour them a quick little taste before they committed to buying a full bottle to go, and sort of really sort of trying to educate people on what to do with Amaros aside from, for the at-home consumption. So I think that was really exciting for us.
That's really cool. In Miami, when others were really eager to kind of get indoor dining back open as soon as possible, Jacqueline kind of went a different direction and really doubled down on expanding the outdoor space. I understand that you kind of negotiated some special terms with your landlord. How have you approached outdoor dining differently, and what sort of creative little touches have you added to make the outdoor? I would imagine Miami outdoors in the summertime can be a little bit of a challenge, but how have you made that a comfortable experience for your guests and for the staff?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most challenging part. If I rewind a little bit to sort of the start of this pandemic, we were really very lucky in the sense that there was a hostel located behind our restaurant that our landlord owned. And when the hostel had closed down due to the pandemic, they loaned us the space to be able to really grow outdoor dining. We didn't really have the option for that prior to that. So we quite literally moved all of our indoor tables outside because we didn't have a ton of outdoor dining. And then once the restrictions were lifted here, which was really early on for Florida, we just didn't really feel comfortable sort of looking around the world and around the United States as to what was happening and the numbers rising. And, we said, we have this great space that's on loan to us. We don't know how long we're going to have it, but let's give this a go and keep it going. And really the community hopped right on board with it. And nobody really even batted an eye at indoor dining. At that time, again, the weather was really, really gorgeous in Miami. The winter months here from November to March are just beautiful. So we were really lucky for that. We did keep one table inside as sort of a chef's table that allowed us to do a Bestia dinner series, which was a chef-driven large format dining that was, again, one table at a time. You could book for up to 6 people. So still keeping it sort of a small group and sort of an exclusive sort of private dining experience. Moving into the summer months has been a little bit more challenging with the outdoor dining. We did actually just this past week get some great news that we're going to be able to keep this space for good. So this has proved to really be a, you know, the light in sort of a bad time. So we will be now doubling the size of our restaurant pre-pandemic, which is really exciting after being open about 9 years, to be able to really grow within the space that I don't know I do know 9 years ago we would not have been able to successfully navigate a restaurant of this size. But now, you know, 9 years in and with the community on board with us, I feel really great about that. As far as our staff, they were all really on board with keeping outdoor dining. They all felt really safe with it. And I think from a health perspective, they felt more comfortable with it, and same with the community. Now we have reintroduced some indoor dining as well. And, you know, we just really try and follow, you know, the best that we can, the CDC guidelines and suggestions, even though there at times it can feel a little bit confusing and flip-flopping back and forth. So, you know, for us, even though mask mandates aren't a thing here, we still require it for our staff and our guests, regardless of vaccination status. There's just too many unknowns at this time, and until there is a little bit more, that's the route that we're going to take. So yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge, but I think, you know, we're figuring it out as we go, and you know, with our staff and our community, I think that's really just what's gotten us through this. You know, I think most other people sort of mentioned this on the call, but especially you know, we've gotten the chance to really connect with our community more so during this time than I think we ever did before. In the height of the pandemic, we had people just calling to check in to see how we were, regardless of placing an order. And it was just a really sweet time to be able to connect like that, you know, and take a step back. So
that's very cool. You know, Miami is such a big city, and I feel like there's so many different factions to the hospitality community there. You know, community being the theme of this year's Tales of the Cocktail conference. Would you speak a little bit about what community means to you now in the context of Miami, and how you think the community has evolved over the pandemic?
For sure. I mean, I think, gosh, Miami has such a wonderful community, with and without, you know, within the industry and speaking without, you know, aside from the industry. But for me, it's really this idea of sort of a fellowship, right? And sort of, you know, a feeling that evokes within people. And I think within Miami, we have a really, really strong fellowship and a really great support system. And when everything sort of happened, it was just all over social media, all the different ideas of how people can support. And again, that possibly meant from, you know, liquor brands to how do they support, how do we support out of work, you know, staff workers, to again, non-industry guests of ours, kind of really learning and understanding the inner workings of a restaurant and the problems that we're facing and how they can get on board. So whether that's buying a gift card now because they might not feel comfortable coming out to dine, again, to being a part of a wine club, or our pasta kits that we were doing. So everybody just really hopped on board, and it was such a really warm feeling during a really sort of dark time. And I think that just made it so much easier to navigate, just knowing that everybody was together. You know, even within our community down here, everybody hopped on a WhatsApp, which we never had before that. And so now we have hundreds of industry members on that WhatsApp. And that was sort of just started as a way to sort of, whether it was to ask questions or to vent about what was going on. And it's just continued. And I don't think that'll ever stop. And that was really great, because prior to us starting that, I was really still looking to some larger organizations. So the James Beard Foundation was really helpful during all of this with some advice and lending some advice during a tough time, or the Babar organization within Brooklyn, New York. They were really great, and so it was awesome to have now those sort of resources within our community down here, to being Miami specific.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it has become a little less competitive and a little more collaborative across all these cities, which has been really, really rewarding to see. Switching gears to the U.S. Central Region, Caer and Sharon Yeung from Daijaboo Pop-Up, two ladies that I know well because you're in my city and in my region. Caer and I work together. Well, first of all, for those who have never experienced Daijaboo, please tell us, what are Super Asian cocktails, and how was Daijaboo born? And most importantly, within the context of these innovative pivots, what have pop-up events looked like in a world where we can't have events?
So Daijaboo Pop-Up, so yes, we do create Super Asian cocktails, but it's actually so much more than that. We try to create a transformative experience where, all of our cocktails are inspired by mainly Caer and our heritage, and it's kind of like artistic and cultural expression. And also we try to include other Asian bartenders to kind of tell their stories and create cocktails from their, backgrounds and whatnot, and also creating a space for guests, of Asian American descent, just creating a space because we didn't really have that growing up, and it was something that was lacking in our community. So we were trying to,
provide that for our community.
Yeah.
We like to define Super Asian cocktails as drinks and experiences where every single element of it calls back to our heritage, or to a concept that is deeply rooted in the Asian American community. So whether it be the glassware, the garnish, the ingredients, the decor, the music, the people that's serving it to you, or the media that's on the television, everything calls back to that, to our heritage. We'd only launched about a year prior to the pandemic. We had already worked together for quite some time, and we won a cocktail competition with a cocktail inspired by the flavors of orange chicken, probably the most iconic of American Chinese dishes. So we only got in, a dozen or so in-person events before all of a sudden we just couldn't. And as the pandemic started, we really, as a team, decided we weren't going to do in-person events, because we understand the people who do need to continue to do things like that because they have, rent to pay and a staff to pay. But as a pop-up, we didn't have any of those obligations. So we felt it very important to be like, we don't need this money right now to survive. If we're going to be doing anything, we have to know it's as safe as it can be, because we're not going to risk anyone's health over a creative project that isn't necessary for our livelihood. But I think that led to a lot of innovation and pivots. We did a 5-week market pop-up, which was probably the most successful time in Daijaboo's existence, because usually our events last 3 days max, and to do 4 days a week for 5 weeks, and to include not only cocktails but a grocery area and 3 different food partners was just a huge change, and also probably the first time we really made a profit, which was great. And we've, in addition to that, done bottled cocktails, to-go pop-ups, collaborative cocktail boxes. Like many of the people on this panel, it was just whatever we could do now that was different to keep people engaged.
And you bought a bus, am I right?
Yes, well, the bus existed prior to the pandemic. It acted as our tour bus for our Texas tour, but since the pandemic, we had enough time to put a well in the bus and set it up so that we can make cocktails. And so we did our first event where we were making cocktails out of the bus recently, which was great, because at that point in Texas, things were okay enough where people could be outside and interacting, but we did not feel comfortable being in an inside space making people drinks. So to, you know, have the kitschy allure of a Super Asian cocktail bus and then the safety of just handing people drinks out of a window was a really great combination.
The bus is super cool. The bus is very cool. During the pandemic, and you know, sadly, long before it, the Asian community across the world and in the United States has been the target of some really horrific acts of racism-driven violence. And something about Daijaboo, I think, that is worth talking about is how advocacy has been such an important cornerstone of the work that you've done with it. And so I was wondering if you would talk about that aspect of your enterprise and the types of initiatives that you've been able to support through the work of Daijaboo.
You want to talk a little bit about your personal experience?
Yeah, I mean, this is heavy, but not only, you know, were we just like itching to get out there and make cocktails and whatnot, but we feel like we had to use our voices for the greater good. Not only have, I mean, I've been a victim of, you know, racism since COVID started. I've had people say nasty things to me, refusing to be served by me, you know, blatantly avoiding me in the groceries because, you know, they said I was like dirty and whatnot. And so I think we're using our powers to create these pop-ups and also work with local, you know, Asian American bar owners and donating proceeds to charities, you know. And I think pretty much every single pop-up we would donate to a charity, you know, fighting for anti-Asian hate, you know, and trying to help people across the US or even like feeding the hungry, you know. There are elders in New York and San Francisco, Oakland, where they would not leave their homes because it's just too scary, you know. So there were charities that we would donate and they would be delivering food to them and whatnot and supplies, you know, like masks, sanitizer. But I think that was like one of our key goals, you know. It wasn't.
Yeah, as people who are really benefiting, like this is extra true for non-Asian people who own Asian restaurants or benefit from Asian culture, but it's really irresponsible to benefit from the culture and not support the people. And even though we are Asian and anything that happens that we're doing technically does support our culture because it supports us, that's not enough for us to market ourselves as a Super Asian pop-up and not support the Asian community to the furthest extent we could. Just what wouldn't be right. So especially when we were in the middle of the pandemic and we were not able to do a pop-up, I felt like there was almost a switch to Daijaboo being like a lifestyle brand. We created a lot of merch. We posted a lot about the different ways people could get involved. And as Sharon said, through every single one of our pop-ups, we at least had one part of it that was directly for raising money for charity. And through the last 2.5 years of Daijaboo being around, we raised about $16,000, I believe, for different charities, the majority of them being ones that directly support the Asian American community. I think that especially after the Atlanta shooting, there was a lot of focus that was brought to Asian Americans Advancing Justice, which is a group that we've been working with for years. They're one of the first groups we donated to because they do a really good job of the legal element of advocacy. And then the other programs that Sharon was talking about, there are a lot of really good on the streets people who are delivering food and helping the individuals, and to be able to help them have funds was the most that we could do because we don't necessarily have the infrastructure to help those people in need. But having all of our events and all of our messaging really be about cultivating a space where Asian American people can feel like themselves and be safe was how we felt we could at least help the culture of our area.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing that experience. So to that end, you know, what does the word community look and feel like to both of you now?
I think it's grown significantly. Because when we first started, the majority of the people who we were working with and talking to were people of the cocktail community who were really excited about the really innovative drinks we were making. Like, yes, it was very cool to have a space for Asian American people, and for the Asian American bartenders that popped up with us, I think it was a really powerful experience to like walk into a space and have the culture of it not be a white American culture, but to be an Asian culture, and to be able to own that and feel more at home than your average guest. But now that we've gotten more into helping with charity organizations, and we were one of the sponsors for the Stop Asian Hate rally that was in Austin, our community has really grown to a very large group of people who are trying to advocate for our community, in addition to growing into a larger community of people in the culinary and food scene. We've done a lot to pair with other small businesses that otherwise wouldn't be operating right now, whether they be food pop-ups or restaurants that had to close. And the more you connect to other members of your community, the more your audience grows and the more they support each other. It's really funny. This weekend, I believe 2 different food vendors that we've worked with that did not work at the same events are now doing a pop-up together, just because we now have this little circle of Asian-owned small businesses in Austin, Texas, who we all just hit each other up whenever we're trying to do something exciting for our community.
Yeah. One last question, and then we'll wrap up. I did want to, you mentioned about lifestyle turning in, or excuse me, Daijinbu turning into kind of this lifestyle brand where you have developed a line of merchandise and all that. Can you talk about, was that a skill set that you sort of came to the table with, one that had to be developed? I'm talking about like the design piece and getting things made, even the logistics of getting things printed and all of that. You know, how did that come to pass? And what other resources did you seek out along the way that might be helpful to someone else who's looking to pivot in that direction?
We are very lucky. We have a Sam. Sam is my husband, and he and I went to art school. And so both of us have a lot of experience in design. We both studied film and animation. So if you go onto our Instagram, you'll find a bunch of very entertaining videos that we've made. And while Sam is not Asian American, a lot of our success has to do with his skill sets, I think. We've leaned heavily on his ability to quickly make a design for us. And then we have a local print shop that we work with. And within a day after something has happened, we can send off a design to be printed on stickers and shirts. And it's just a really quick turnaround. Having really strong design skills and media skills are so important these days. And to not just have someone who is a outsourced freelancer that you go to, but to have someone that's on your team who really understands what you're trying to convey and make. And also someone who is not just me and Sharon, because usually we're so bogged down with like, we have to batch, we have to do all of the business side of things. We have to, you know, there's so much that already goes into running a bar and running a pop-up. And so to have someone else who understands that, who is focused just on the media side of things, has been incredibly useful. So I know not everyone can have a Sam, but if you can, I highly recommend it.
Well, I wanted to thank all of you for your time today. We have heard the gamut, everything from cocktail kits to subscriptions to cool pop-ups to candles, cocktail scented candles, which still blows my mind. We've really touched on so many really exciting projects. And it sounds like all of them are going to live on and thrive as we move forward. Thank you to Tales of the Cocktail, and thank you so much to Campari for hosting this conversation today. Yeah, thank you very much, and I wish you nothing but prosperity in the year ahead, everyone.